Highlander, the source. If you don't mind me saying, I really do think this is one of my masterworks. It certainly took enough time to do. And really it is... I think everything that I had done for Highlander was leading up to this, so you'll have to excuse me if there's a fair amount of ego thrown into this one. I really do like this review. And it was kind of a triumph for me because this was the... I had had a lot of health problems leading up to this, and so it had actually been about a month between reviews, which is longer than I like to go. I usually try to do something once every 2 weeks. I have so many things were kind of conspiring against me in this one. I had to get my medication changed for my heart condition, and in fact I still have to get it changed again. I think I have to get it upped. I've got this condition where if I do anything physically strenuous, I have a real problem with my my heart rate and my blood pressure, and so it's kind of hard to get that regulated. I have to stay very relaxed for most of it, and so I think the stressful life was kind of catching up to me. I put myself under a lot of pressure, and so there was a lot of things keeping a relaxed pace, and so there was that. I was feeling really bad because I had to do what's called a stress test, which is they basically put in a treadmill and provoke the kind of fainting episode that causes me to feel crappy for just about a week. And on top of that, I had jury duty, and so I had to go do that, which took all day. And I'm not complaining. Jury duty is our patriotic duty, but I was on the hook for a major first-degree murder case, and so had I been chosen, and I would have gladly served, I really would have. In fact, I kind of made it to what I called Final Jeopardy. There was probably like 25 people. I made it to the final pool, and they just didn't want me. But yeah, they said that it was going to be about till mid-January that we were going to be hearing this case, and my brother said, yeah, right, these things tend to go on for quite a long time. So I'm actually very fortunate that I didn't get it, that I didn't have to go to jury duty, and for a lot of reasons, mainly because you do get compensated for your time if you're on a jury trial, if you have a provable regular salary, and I don't. All my money is made on commission, and so I think something like the best I would have been able to do is at $40 per day, based on jury duty, which would not have made me very happy. Like I said, there's no way to prove my income because it fluctuates radically. It's very tidal in nature, the ad rates. But anyway, this was the first time I'd managed to feel good enough to get in front of the camera and do a full-on review again, and this was feet first into the fire because this was a long review, probably my longest review, not counting like Phantasmagoria, but this is probably my longest, angriest, most yelling review of all of them, because I honestly don't think I've ever been madder at a piece of media than Highlander the Source. And I'm probably telling the same story I told in the beginning of this, but I hadn't even watched this movie. I bought it. I saw it at a Walmart. I just picked it up. I was like, oh, this is going to suck, because it was direct-to-video. And so the only reason I did watch it was for Highlander the Quickening, and it was so bad. And it really, I think I say, it's not bad because it was made poorly. Highlander Endgame was bad because it was made poorly. It made all sorts of stupid, boneheaded decisions. Highlander 2 was bad because it tried to reach too far. Highlander Endgame was bad because it was bad, and because I am convinced to this day that it was made by people with a simmering contempt for Highlander. It's almost like it was made by a guy who was intentionally trying to just say fuck you to all the Highlander fans. And right away, I'm not actually sure what I want to say for this commentary because normally I don't go over 30 minutes. It's kind of my unwritten rule where I never expect you guys to sit around longer than I would expect you to sit around for any TV show. So 30 minutes is about it. But for this one, this was a special case, and I think you'll realize if you ever watch the movie that this was a special case. And so pretty much every single thing I wanted to say about this movie, I fucking said in this review. So I'm gonna try to come up with some new stuff, but it's just I'm already struggling for. After the Jaguar thing, I pretty much had to finish. You know, I had come this far. I'd done 2. I'd done Jaguar, and so this one. Hang on a second. Let me think. I think what it comes down to is you don't even need to be a study. You don't need to study the script writing, filmmaking. Joseph Campbell, Bill Moyer, Sid Field. You don't need to know this stuff to know that you don't do the things that they do in this movie. Just starting out by changing everything. If you're gonna make a sequel, make something familiar. They change the setting, they change the characters, they change the relationships between the characters. Like Faith gone. The friendships between them, the organizations they belong to, the location that it generally takes place in, be it Canada or the United States. No, it's in Eastern Europe now, after the apocalypse, when cannibals roam the earth. There is absolutely nothing familiar except the fact that Duncan MacLeod and Joe happen to be in this movie, and they all act completely differently than they did in the show. There's just no lifeline here. There's nothing for any fan who, by the way, are the only people they could possibly be marketing this movie to are the diehard fans. There's just nothing else to hold on to. You don't do that. You gotta keep it consistent somewhere. And like, there's another people. I get probably one email a day telling me this, as if I didn't already know. But there's an anime version of Highlander called The Search for Vengeance. And I won't review that one, just because it's okay. Again, it was rather like Highlander 3, where it was okay, and ironically enough, it's probably the second best in the series, if only because it basically follows the formula. And it actually does do a lot of things that I would kind of critique, where it is another one thing where it goes post-apocalyptic. It changes all the characters, but at the same time, it is a Highlander story, because you've got this hero who's immortal, who has a katana, he's a MacLeod, and he's fighting against a pretty stereotypical. He's a Nazi basically, but they do the right things in this movie. It's hard to explain unless you've seen it, but you go back and there's flashbacks to Scotland. It explains his origin, where he comes from. It explains his love interest, what is driving him on to vengeance, and it follows this quest for vengeance all through history, where he's trying to kill this guy, and for hundreds of years he's been trying to kill this guy who killed his wife, destroyed his village, and has basically been making his life a living hell. So there's all these really cool flashbacks all through history of him trying to find this guy in World War II, in I forget all the wars he was in. World War II stands out because he was on the Nazi side, the bad guy was. And it worked, and it actually did some daring things, but it never really strayed from the formula. As in, there were mutant dudes. There was like this big motherfucker who swung a gigantic chainsaw, which was just cool. He fights this guy with a chainsaw. There's a decapitation with a hand grenade. Again, it's worth watching. If you're a fan of Highlander, really it's worth watching just to cleanse the palate, that flick. Just because it wasn't stupid, And I'll be the first to admit, when I first saw it, I was really down on it because I was like, oh, Jesus, another post-apocalyptic movie? Why do we have to do these things post-apocalyptic? It does not need to be done. But at the same time, it did keep it grounded. It kept the flashbacks, which I still think are the heart and soul of Highlander. I did think that the hero of I forget his name. It's not Owen MacLeod. It's like it's gonna bother me. The hero of that one is rather monosyllabic. He's very one-dimensional, where all he wants to do, he has no character arc, basically, where he just bops into town. He's looking for this guy. He wants to kill this guy, and everything he does, everything he drives for is to kill this guy. There's basically no romantic lead in or out. He has no interest in women. All he's interested in is killing this guy. And so pretty much every conversation boils down to that. And so I thought his character was incredibly simplistic. But again, when done properly, there's really not much wrong with that. And Highlander was never, ever that complex. And so I actually struggled a lot writing this one because there were so many things that occurred so quickly that were so stupid that I had to come up with reactions to these things, because pretty much every time these things happened, I watched this with my brother, and every time shit like this happened, the orbital wobble thing was probably the first one. We had to stop the movie because we had to go back and watch it again because we could not believe that they had said something so stupid. And again, maybe it only bothers me. I don't know. But orbital wobble? I looked it up. I was like, I don't know what orbital wobble is, but that can't be any kind of justification for what the fuck is going on here. And then the hair. When the guy with the hair, his name's Giovanni, by the way, when that happened, we had to stop the movie again. We were like, are you serious? Is this guy really in the movie? And yeah. There's no explanation for any of this. This scene. I actually wonder if I should even be telling you this. Okay. If I may get serious for a minute. That scene was one if I struggled pretty much all day on that scene, on what kind of reaction to do with the guy with the hair. Because really he is the mascot of this horrible movie, is this guy with the hair. This movie you might have been able to take this movie a lot seriously had this guy not been in the movie, or if he looked at all normal. Because everyone else looks normal, except for the elder, but I'll get to that. But this guy, look at this. He looks like a fucking cartoon character. So I really wanted to do something where, early on in the movie, I was like, I see this guy, and I'm kind of resigned that, okay, this is the way the movie's going to play it. I really wanted to do this thing where I was just horrified to my fucking core about this hair. It's incredible. So I was like, what kind of reaction could I do? Because I already did kind of a face freeze type thing with the orbital wobble. And I had to come up with something for the Princes of the Universe cover that is done later. So every time when I kind of did the rough draft of the script, there were 5 instances of me just standing or staring at the camera, mouth agape, not knowing what the fuck to say. Just stunned, petrified horror looking at this movie. And I just decided to keep them in for the most part, because there really is no other reaction to this. If you're a fan and you're watching this movie, there's no other reaction to have as this parade of moronic shit just keeps going. One after the other, these things that completely betray and make this movie completely fucking ridiculous. I was just stunned. And that's what really killed me about this one was nothing should stun me at this point. Nothing should shock me about Highlander. We've done Zeist. We've done Bruce Payne. We've done all of these characters. We've done so much stupid shit with this stuff. And then this movie, every 20 seconds, is just horrifying me. And so there was a moment where I had it originally scripted out, and I had to change it almost immediately, where what I was originally going to do was, after the guy with the hair showed up, I was going to go okay, that settles it then. And so I was kind of thinking of a way where I kind of eased myself into a bathtub and slit my wrists. And so I immediately felt really bad about even thinking of that, because a while ago I got word that a fan of mine had committed suicide, and that actually really shocked me. I was actually down for a long time, thinking that a fan of mine had actually emailed me. I think basically the day he did it, and yeah, that was the fun times were pretty much over for me for a while. And when you have any kind of celebrity or people really start to like you or dislike you, there's a responsibility that goes with that. And I think for the first time that really hit me was, as an entertainer, you have responsibilities to fans and whatnot. And so, I kind of argue sometimes with fans, and I kind of, they get on my balls and I get on theirs, and we argue a lot. And people say, I kind of complain sometimes, like, what you guys think you deserve to dictate schedule to me and stuff like that. And so we've gotten into fights over schedule. Me and the fans have gotten into fights over content, crossovers, things like that. And so, but I think for the first time, really, like the effect that people can have on other people really, really sank me for a long time. Just to know that I had affected somebody so deeply. The person did not commit suicide because of me. I'll just say that. I don't want to get too far into it, but I wasn't a cause, but I was a significant part of this person's life in the last days of his life, and so that was stunning. And so I've kind of taken out references to any kind of suicide in my reviews, to where there was a scene early on where I forget what it was, but Captain America, where I had Nostalgia Critic hang himself. This was before then. But you're just not going to see that kind of humor anymore, because to me it kind of ceased being funny. And so yeah, I wrote that, immediately felt bad for even writing it, because it's real. That sort of stuff, it didn't again, I'm digging a hole here, but whatever you may think, it's not that bad. I didn't influence anybody to commit suicide. I didn't do anything that would trigger somebody to do that. But it really did strike a chord with me emotionally and personally, into where I shouldn't make jokes about that kind of thing, especially not in the wake of that. At least not for a long, long while. There's kind of there was a window, and this was too soon, so I didn't want to do this. But anyway, if I may talk about the movie again, I think this is the first time you really hear the guy talk, except for when he says, "There can be only me." And actually, I rather like that line. That's probably the only time in this movie I was actually like, okay, that's pretty badass. Where he's like, "There can be only." That was a good twist on it. I liked it, and but this is the first time we ever see them fight. And I think this is where it really starts to sink in what you're in for when it comes to this movie. The fighting style, the over-reliance on special effects, video game level special effects, really, to where it's nothing like any of the other movies you've seen up to now. And this movie's story is really one of alienation, where you've got you've got this established franchise and you've just destroyed it. They've changed every single thing about it, given the fans nothing. And hello, Joe. I would like to ask how he knows Joe. In fact, how he knows Duncan, how he knows anybody. He's this guardian of the source, and hello, Joe. Yeah. The sitcom gag is probably overused, but I think here it was warranted, just because that hello Joe thing is so over the top goofy. I really wonder how it stayed in the script. Like, why they decided to make the guardian of the source basically a comedy character. He's a really, I was about to say he's a really funny guy, because he's not a funny guy, but really, like, every line he says in some way is a wisecrack. He's almost never menacing. He's never really like, "I'm gonna kill you." He's never like, "Soon the prize will be mine." Except for that one point where he says, "There can be only me." That's really the only time he's ever directly threatened anybody or sounded menacing. Every other time he's making fun of the guy's accent. He's making jokes. He's getting hit by a car, going, "Hey, how you doing?" and flying around, and it just, one wonders why you do that. I can't explain it. There's a lot more with Anna that I cut. There's a lot of her just kind of wandering around, kind of establishing. She is kind of hot, but they do a lot to establish the post-apocalyptic world where everyone's starving. Where she goes to like a football stadium and she's got like a loaf of bread. And so there's a bunch of people who live under the bleachers, and she gives them a loaf of bread, and she's given a vision by the elder to tell her to go seek the source. And I guess it's to establish the fact that there are cannibals, although we go a long way from people being hungry to cannibalism. I'm not quite sure we established that. Oh, doy! Yeah. I don't know why Amanda wasn't in this. There is actually another Highlander thing that I have never seen. I've seen a clip of it, but apparently there was some kind of like a spin-off episode that was made not long ago between, I think it was mainly between Mythos and Amanda, where they just kind of talk about stuff. There's no fighting in it. It's just like, I think Amanda just kind of comes to visit Mythos, and they talk about all the shit they've seen over their hundreds of years of existence. And they talk about Duncan, and I don't think Duncan's there. I'm sure somebody will pass on a link when I see this. I call this guy Film Brain, which is probably unfair. I call him Film Brain because he's English, but that's about all I got. He is kind of a smallish guy. I don't know. This was a really stupid line, and I should have called it out a lot harder than I did, where Joe sees this guy. You know, Joe's been a watcher basically all his life. And he sees the immortal prick his ears up, you know, something he's seen a lot. He sees this dude running around in the shadows, and he's like, man, that's one fast bird. Yeah, it's a 6-foot bird, Joe. It's a fucking bird. Clearly, it's the Eastern European ostrich that's been stalking you. And what the fuck is with you, Joe? Really? A bird? How long have you been doing this, Joe? Come on. I think we're getting up on the point again where the Guardian starts to sing. Yeah, that was another movie stopper moment. Yeah, we really couldn't believe it. Why does Mythos need a helmet? I hadn't even touched on this fat bastard right here. It's hard to tell exactly who that's ripping off. At first I was kind of thinking of that fat dude in Blade. Remember that guy? Really tubby dude? I don't know. So, lost my train of thought there. When you never see this thing where, well, I guess maybe you do, but I remember where in the first movie it was kind of endearing, where, you know, the first movie was kind of a Queen vehicle, where basically every song on that one was by Queen. And so there's a scene in there where I think they say it a couple of times, where they go back to Connor in World War II, and he saves a little girl, and she goes, like, why aren't you dead? And he goes, hey, it's a kind of magic. And so it was kind of a little wink to the audience, right? And so I was like, okay, that was a Queen song. All right. You know, people were kind of down with that because it worked, you know, saying it's a kind of magic. It was, you know, it was a wink, and it wasn't abusive. In this one, he starts to sing Who Wants to Live Forever, which goes beyond a wink. That is taking a piece of plywood, spray painting "This is from a Queen" song on it, and then violently beating the audience over the head with it for about 2 minutes. This editing is amazing. They really wanted to do this thing where they had really frenetic editing with that red and blue type thing going on, and really when you see the Guardian doing his running thing, that really fast-paced thing where he kind of chugs around, you see it really early in the movie, but as soon as you see that, they should have looked at the dailies and gone, okay, we don't have a movie, because it's really, really bad. You know, there were stuff they did in Highlander 3 where Mario Van Peebles kind of had like illusory powers and things like that, but they never really went overboard with the magic type thing, where it really did usually just boil down to guys with swords. You know, they occasionally kind of had magic. Oh, and that reminds me, in Highlander Endgame, that one scene that pissed me off that never happens in the movie, there's a scene where you see Kel get chopped in half by Duncan, and the two halves kind of like, I forget if they like fuse back together or they kind of step apart and become two Kells, right? And that never happened. But really, that was the most we ever seen in Magic was in the trailer, and I think they cut that. But yeah, in this one, it just becomes full-on video game. It looks like Johnny Cage's Shadow Kick whenever he does this stuff. They make the Immortals mortal. You actually do get to see Mythos fight, and strangely, Mythos gets his ass kicked more often than not. He gets hacked across the throat, and he never really recovers from that. He has like this big scar because he was like kind of immortal at that point. I don't know how you can be kind of, but he is. I love this when he racks the shell out of the shotgun. I did edit this where I made it look like he kind of racks it out and immediately jams. He does fire like 2 or 3 times. This is not one of Duncan's best moments. This is pretty much where I got immediately fed up with this, where I hated this movie, but I pretty much got just offended. I chose to be offended by this flick, irrevocably so, when they broke the katana. I was like, okay, great. You've just basically taken the iconic weapon of the series and just shattered it. And I think they do this actually in Highlander 3, but they fix it, because it's kind of like his training montage when he fixes the katana. No such luck here. Oh, and by the way, this is a scene I wanted to call out because I asked earlier on. You may think I hit that scene with the tower too hard, like, why is he in the tower? Why did he come here? Why did he go up to the floor? Why did he make the call there? I did hit that really hard, but for good reason. That scene is the scene that draws pretty much every one of the characters together, and it's pointless. And I asked this question, like, why did he have to go there to make this call? He had no reason to. And so I asked the question, are there no cell phones? Are there no PDAs? Is there no email? And you actually see in the scene where Joe gets the phone call, Mythos calls Joe at the bar. And he's like, you need to find McLeod. And Joe's like, I'm on it. And so, but he picks up a cell phone. So clearly, cell phones exist. The global telecommunications network still exists. So, I don't know. This scene was actually not too bad. It was pointless, but it was actually pretty good just to see the Immortals kind of working together and fighting as a team, which is something you don't see in Highlander ever. It's almost always one-on-one fights, or lacking that very limited two-on-one fights that quickly become one-on-one fights. This was actually good seeing these guys work together as a team somewhat. That one was just for me right there. But coming up is the point where when I showed this to other people, they thought I made this up. when I showed this scene to other people, they were like, "What? Was this supposed to be funny? Like, because this? Why didn't you just use Queen?" And I'm like, "That's the." I'm so stunned by this. The sheer ineptitude, the lunacy, just the sheer madness of including this horrible, god-awful cover of Princes of the Universe. Oh my god. I think I call this unholy. And what's funny is I actually cut a lot of this song out. This song actually goes on. You basically hear the whole song. What they do is they start playing the song, and they start to do a travel montage where they leave the dock, they get a car, and they start to drive to their camp outside, or wherever you want to call it, the cabin they go to. You hear about two and a half minutes of this song. It's basically a Manos driving montage. In fact, I was actually considering doing the whole montage and playing the Manos travel music, because it like right here, you see this, but it goes on for 2 minutes. And I couldn't believe it. Like the fact that you wasted the song on nothing, basically, and you chose the worst possible goddamn song you could have ever chosen. And everyone I've ever shown this scene to goes, why just couldn't they get the Queen song? They licensed that song for every single episode of the TV series. And I really have to wonder whether or not Queen saw this movie and decided not to sign off on it, or what. Because if so, Queen made the right choice. But, yeah, I still have no words. When my brother and I saw that, we basically stopped the movie for an hour. We couldn't stand it. We had to stop. we watched something else. You know, that's how bad it was. We were physically unable to compel ourselves to keep watching. It's still, to this day, it really is one of the most head-scratchingly insane things I've ever seen in my life. Just the sheer balls to try to cover Queen. You know, I hold Queen as one of the... Freddie Mercury really is a legendary vocalist. And, you know, that's actually why, you'll hear it later, but when Pat the NES Punk sings the show must go on, I still have no idea why they even bother to put Queen songs on, like, the karaoke or SingStar or any of these karaoke songs, karaoke games, just because Freddie Mercury's voice was 1 in a million, really. Like, that guy had a voice so powerful. If anyone can actually cover Freddie Mercury, you need to get in music, like, immediately. Because if you have a voice that even rivals Freddie Mercury, you need to seek out a place in show business, because you've got talent, and these guys don't do it. They do, like, this... I've heard somebody call it, like, a Daughtry-esque cover of Princes of the Universe. I'm not sure I agree with that, because Daughtry actually has some modicum of talent. I don't know if I would be able to say, yeah. I still can't justify this guy's hair. I regret calling it a mohawk. I actually didn't know what to call it, because it's not a mohawk. I admit that. It's kind of like a mohawk that covers his entire head. Later on, I revised it, and I couldn't change it in the script because I'd already recorded it, but I pretty much call it some peroxided wedge of hair. It's like a wave. It really is a wedge. And so, and I still regret to this day, I've actually had people call this immediately, and I still can't believe I didn't see it. But when this came up, and the picture came up, and you saw this guy for the first time, almost everyone in the world thought, what is Albert Wesker doing here? The guy from the Resident Evil, with the glasses and the hair. He looks like Wesker. And yes! I'm like, oh! Sometimes it really is the little things that you miss out. Because it was one of those things where I kind of shopped it around and asked the guys, like, who does this guy look like? Does this guy look like anybody? Because I knew it looked like somebody, but I didn't know who it looked like. And yeah, this guy gets killed immediately. How did we get here, guys? There is a really good scene that I cut just because I didn't want to be too complimentary to this movie. Probably the second and only good thing in this flick is there's a point where Duncan tries to save Giovanni, and he gets into trouble because there's dudes on motorcycles kind of running around and trying to kill him. And so Mythos saves him by throwing his sword and embedding it in a tree. And a guy on a motorcycle drives into the sword and cuts his own head off. And I'm like, that was pretty awesome. Okay, you got me there. That was really good. But I didn't want to switch gears all of a sudden when I was calling this movie stupid. And you're like, okay, that was pretty cool. I guess I could have, but whatever. Again, this is a joke just for me, the whole Ghostbusters thing. But this bothered me every time. They keep cutting back to establish the celestial alignment. And if the planets were even remotely this close, if any one of those planets were even remotely this close, the planet would quite literally shake itself apart. And pretty much all life on Earth would end in a matter of hours. And this almost goes without comment. Okay, yeah, here's one thing probably the biggest regret I have in this review is when I say that I swear to you up and down that I didn't edit this, I didn't change anything, I didn't do anything to this footage. This was okay. I lied, and not just because I added the Benny Hill music. I thought really this scene. I was always going to put Benny Hill in that scene where they get into the fight, and I don't know why I said I didn't edit anything. I really should have said, like, pretty much when it came up, I just threw Benny Hill in there because it was like the one and only time I could. It was like it's perfect, and so. There's another scene where I kind of make an edit. You'll see a fade. You'll see a really bad fade at the halfway point of this fight because they stop to talk and kind of exchange banter for like 30 seconds in the middle of this fight, and then they just go right back to fighting. But oh, hang on a second. I don't know if you heard that, but I have received an email from the general manager. No, okay, it's my brother. Yeah, where was I? I added the fade just to keep the fight going. It didn't really affect the fight at all. And I added the Benny Hill thing. I should not have told you that I didn't change this. What I meant was, I didn't speed this footage up. I didn't add the effects. I didn't make this fight look any stupider than it actually is, as it is shown in the movie. I added the Benny Hill, and that's it. So yeah, if you were misled, if you were offended by this, I apologize. I meant to say that I hadn't actually changed the choreography or the speed. What I wanted to say was, you might have thought I sped this footage up to make it look like he drove himself into the earth. No, this is actually what happens in the flick. I think we're winding up to the part where I get probably madder than I've ever been. This is not a put on. I was really, really that mad about this thing. I think the line that sums it up is, you've been busting my balls since like 1991 to lead up to this. This... just to completely mishandle and misinterpret and screw up everything that everyone's been leading up to. You know, basically changing the whole thesis of the show. You know, there can be only one. Relatively simple premise, but they decided to change it to something of purity of heart, because I guess they just didn't want... maybe they wanted to figure there was some kind of redeeming value. Now, there actually is an interesting point to be made here, where one would ask the question logically, how do they know that? You know, how do they know there can be only one? And this is a question that is never answered. And, you know, golly, it might be interesting if we actually did answer that question at some point. How do they know there can be only one? What do you, like, how do they know what the prize is? To a degree, that's the question that's answered in Highlander 2, but we're ignoring that one. And so I guess the point they might have been trying to make is that, what if somebody just made it up? You know, like, somebody just decided that it's as good a reason as any. You know, like, some insane guy, you know, just a long time ago decided, you know, we must be fated to fight. And I'm tempted to say it's not a bad idea. It's still a bad idea. But it might not have been as bad an idea if it were properly handled, given the gravity that it deserves. Had people actually mentioned, you know, in the movie, you know, you mean we've been fighting all this time for nothing? You know, all this stuff I've been told is wrong, and, you know, Mythos just kind of waves his hand. They hand wave it away. They go like, well, maybe we just told ourselves we need to fight to feel better or something. It's bullshit. You know it is. You know, all of it. Like, I don't know how they know that they all need to fight. But to completely invalidate every movie and the premise of the entire series up to this point is, it serves no purpose. And in fact, all it does is alienate and infuriate your established fan base. It's why I'm so mad about the whole thing, is because they took every last thing about this show, and then they inverted it. You know, it's not about being a good fighter anymore. It's about being a really nice guy. And I don't think you even need to see the series to realize how completely irrelevant that makes everything we've seen up to this point. All the struggles we've seen, you know, from the beginning, Ramirez tells Connor, he says, you know, if the Kurgan wins the prize, then all life on humanity will be plunged into an age of darkness. Okay, if the Kurgan wins the prize, all of humanity will be plunged into an age of darkness. And it's not true. I mean, none of it. And again, if you're talking Highlander 1, Highlander 3, you know, he wins the prize at the end of those movies, and I don't think they've ever really invalidated that point. I don't know how they dance around that. They just kind of, again, they hand wave that away, but they've established that the prize exists, and Connor McLeod was not exactly the most pure of heart motherfucker around, you know? And here's what you're really not going to believe, and this is the stuff I've been told, and I believe it, is that apparently this was originally scheduled to be the first in a trilogy. This was meant to kick off a new trilogy. And I think I see where they're going with this one. Believe it or not, I do. If you think about it a certain way, then the child that Duncan has with Anna is something of an, I won't say immaculate conception, but it kind of is. To where, you've got, they said the child was a gift from the source. They would have never had a child otherwise. So it really is like divine providence that they had this child. So basically, Duncan MacLeod has given birth to the Messiah, if you think about it a certain way. And I'm sure they were thinking about it that way to do some kind of spin-off or like the trilogy, the second act of the trilogy being, you have this Messiah who's been, who's born of the source, born of the immortals here, and in the third movie kind of takes his place and becomes the new hero of Highlander, trying to... I saw the wheels turning, and the more I hear about it, the more it makes sense, where they were trying to kick off something new, where you've got this new world, you've got this new hero, you can phase out Adrian Paul and everything like that. This is... I was actually talking to Pat the NES Punk about something I could put over the credits, and so I actually kind of wish I'd consulted with him before about this movie to get his input on it. It might have been interesting to hear what he had to say about it. Somebody actually sent me the first draft script of this, but yeah, this is Pat singing "The Show Must Go On" at a trade expo, and it's horrible. He's dialed in for about 4 seconds, and 4 seconds only. And then he proceeds to torture this fucking song. I told him, I was like, Pat, if you do this song will end you. People, I should use this to blackmail you, Pat. This is horrible. And he's like, I was doing okay for a few seconds. I was like, yeah, for a few seconds, you kinda, you were there for, this close. And then it proceeds to rapidly fall down a fucking canyon. But so yeah, I make sure to give Pat all the credit in the world for this song, because really, you're never going to hear anything like this ever again. And actually, I would suggest you go to Pat's channel, because he got a bunch more people torturing songs at this trade expo, especially this Japanese businessman who is actually somewhat infamous. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. See you later.